Chapter 633. That night after the soldiers returned home. Some went to the restaurant to drink, some went to visit relatives and friends they had not seen in a long time. Some went to the brothels to admire the flowers. They had been on the Eastern Front for so long, fighting to the death every day, and rarely had time to enjoy themselves. This time they had finally arrived at Cloud Sea City, so they had to have fun. Obviously, most of the soldiers did not take Immerse's words seriously. Only a very small number of soldiers really memorized the multiplication formula. In a military tent, a soldier with a dull face was reciting the multiplication formula. 4 7 28 5 7 35 6 7 6 7 40. A soldier outside who had just returned from the brothels could not help but laugh when he saw this. Shuangfeng, it's fine that you're usually so dumb, but today you're actually memorizing this troublesome multiplication formula. I really don't know how someone as dull as you survived on the Eastern Front until now. I Liaoshan really admire you. Shuangfeng smiled bitterly and said, I'm usually not good at anything and I'm always looked down on. This time I finally have a chance to improve my strength, so of course I have to seize it. Ah, you really believe in dullards. Liaoshan laughed as he shook his head and went to sleep in his tent. Shuangfeng watched Liaoshan enter the tent and stared at him for a moment. Then he lowered his head, opened the multiplication formula table and continued to recite. 4 7 28 5 7 35 6 7 6 7 40. There were less than 50 people who really memorized the multiplication formula like Shuangfeng. 10 days was not a long time, but it was not short either. In these 10 days, Shuangfeng and the other 40 people had already memorized the multiplication formula. They could even recite it backwards. They were all giant dragons who were usually weak in the army and were not valued. The other dragons did not take the multiplication formula seriously at all. They just ate, drank and played every day. When Kong Hai saw this, he cursed in his heart. The multiplication formula was such a profound technique and the teacher could teach it to these guys, but they did not cherish it. He wanted to force these soldiers to learn it, but since the teacher said that it was up to them whether they learned it or not, he could not go against the teacher's wishes. At noon on the 10th day on the huge training field, the more than 40 soldiers who had memorized the multiplication formula couldn't wait any longer. They lined up neatly and waited for Teacher Imo. As for the other warriors, they were still indulging in debauchery. Anyway, that Teacher Imo had said that it was up to them whether they wanted to learn or not. It didn't matter if they didn't want to learn. At noon, Immorse finally appeared. Kong Hai followed closely behind Immorse. When Kong Hai saw that there were less than 50 people, he was instantly enraged. These little bastards are really rebelling against them. I'll go and get them all. After all, Kong Hai had been in the army for thousands of years. In his anger, all the vulgar words came out. Immorse waved his hand and said faintly, there's no need for that. This matter was originally voluntary. They were not forced to do it. Kong Hai could only nod. Yes, Instructor Imo. All the soldiers were looking at Immorse on the stage expectantly. Immorse jumped off the stage and came in front of one of the soldiers. What's your name? Shuangfeng. Li Shuangfeng. The soldier was so nervous that he stuttered a little. Immorse said with an amiable smile, Shuangfeng, let me see how you do it. Shuangfeng immediately sat down cross-legged and began to circulate the energy in his body. A moment later he completed 81 circulations. Immorse nodded. Overall it's not bad. However, when the energy passes through the Tianwei point, you must rush through it slowly. Otherwise, the impact of the energy on the Tianwei point will be too great. The effect of the cultivation will be greatly reduced. Try to cultivate again. Remember, you must slow down when you pass through the Tianwei point. The soldier was very confused. In the past, when his father taught him how to cultivate, he said that when passing through the Tianwei point he must rush through it quickly to stimulate the cells and meridians in his body. Why was this teacher completely different from what his father said? However, when he saw how respectful the Star Master was to this teacher, he didn't dare to have any more doubts. In any case, he didn't get much out of his normal cultivation. He was only a rank 2 evolved dragon. Moreover, it seemed that he had no hope of breaking through to rank 2 in this lifetime. He might as well try this method. Thinking of this, he began to cultivate according to Immorse's instructions. When the energy passed through the Tianwei point, he didn't rush through it violently like before. Instead, he slowed it down. Just this time, he suddenly felt a sense of comfort in his limbs and bones that he hadn't felt before. After 2 circulations he had an answer to his doubts. Sure enough, this teacher was right. After 81 circulations he suddenly felt a surge of energy rushing through his body. All the meridians in his body had an indescribable sense of comfort. It was also at this time that the energy in his body suddenly spread in all directions. Fortunately, after thousands of years of cultivation he was very experienced in controlling energy. He didn't let the energy spread out of his body. Then a second time, a third time. The energy spread out 3 times in a row. Even the surrounding soldiers widened their eyes in shock. Although Shuang Feng's energy didn't spread out of his body, they could feel the impact of the energy. In the past, this kind of energy impact would only happen when breaking through. Shuang Feng had broken through, and he had broken through 3 ranks in a row. Sure enough, Shuang Feng opened his eyes and his eyes shone brightly. He looked at himself in disbelief from his feet to his hands, and then from his hands to his feet. His tone was extremely excited. Teacher, I broke through 3 ranks in a row. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The sound of the soldiers drawing in a breath of cold air could be heard one after another. Shuang Feng hadn't been able to advance a single grade in the past 1,000 years. Now he had advanced 3 grades in just a short 5 minutes of cultivation. This was too exaggerated. Amidst the shock, these soldiers were filled with anticipation. Fortunately, they didn't indulge in debauchery like the other soldiers. Fortunately, they seized this opportunity. Immorse nodded at Shuang Feng, then looked at another soldier. Next. Soon, a few hours later, all of the 40-odd warriors had leveled up. The least advanced by 2 grades and the most advanced by 4 grades. Kong Hai, who was watching from the side, was dumbfounded. Advancing to 4th grade in a single cultivation session. This was even more terrifying than the students of the academy. However, after some thought he understood the reason behind this. These soldiers had been cultivating for a much longer time than the students of the academy. Most of them had been cultivating for at least 1,000 years. The energy accumulated in their bodies as well as the tempering of their cells and meridians was naturally not something that the students could compare to. With Teacher Mo's guidance, their breakthroughs had come naturally. Advancing to 4th grade was unexpected, but it was also within reason. Chapter 634. Under Immorse's guidance, the 40-plus dragon warriors quickly broke through. Moreover, Immorse's guidance this time used the time skill. Apart from the first double Feng, the rest of the dragon warriors basically compressed their time. What was supposed to be 5 minutes was actually just a few seconds. After breaking through, the dragon warriors cupped their fists towards Immorse and knelt on one knee. We will never forget Teacher Mo's great kindness. We will never forget Teacher Mo's great kindness. The dragon warriors said gratefully. Some of them had broken through 2 ranks, while others had broken through 4 ranks. If not for Immorse, they probably wouldn't even be able to break through 1 rank. In this lifetime he would die at his current level. Moreover, the significance of Immorse helping them break through was not only an increase in their strength, but also an extension of their lifespan. They were all evolved dragons. Every time they advanced a rank, their lifespan would be extended by 1,000 years. In other words, Immorse only used a few seconds to extend each of their lifespan by at least 2,000 years. Such a great kindness naturally made them excited and moved. One of the evolved dragons said, Teacher Immo, if you have any use for us in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. The rest of the dragons nodded. Immorse waved his hand and said, Brothers, you have been fighting day and night on the Eastern Front, using your lives to protect our safety. It's my honor to be able to do something for you. How could I dare to ask for anything in return? This made the dragon warriors have a deeper understanding of Immorse. At the same time, they admired Immorse even more in their hearts. They originally thought that this teacher who could help them break through 2 ranks in a short time was a senior expert who would be high and mighty. They didn't expect this senior expert to treat them like this. It must be known that in today's society, although they were fighting on the front lines every day, not many dragons respected them. Because with the development of society, the dragons had become more materialistic and more materialistic. The dragons no longer worshipped heroes but those rich bosses. And now this archmage was treating them with such respect. How could they not be moved? Immorse waved his hand and said, It's already late. It's getting late. Everyone go back and rest. If you want, you can stay here for another 3 to 5 days before returning to the Eastern Front. The soldiers cupped their fists towards Immerse. Thank you, Teacher Mo. That night Shuangfeng was cultivating in his tent. Liao Shan returned from outside. He opened Shuangfeng's tent and glanced inside. Seeing that Shuangfeng was still cultivating, he couldn't help but shake his head. I say, Shuangfeng, don't you find it boring? Look at this colorful world, it's so much better than our boring Eastern Front. It's not easy to come here, don't you know how to go out and have some fun? However, just as he said this, he suddenly froze. This was because he could sense from Shuangfeng's cultivation that there was something wrong with Shuangfeng's aura. It seemed to be many times stronger than before. He carefully sensed it again and asked in surprise, Shuangfeng, you've broken through? After both of them had completed 81 cycles of cultivation, they slowly opened their eyes. I've broken through. Liao Shan was stunned again. But that's not right. You were only a rank 2 super-evolved dragon before. Even if you broke through, you'd only be rank 3. I'm rank 4. Why does your aura seem to be stronger than mine now? Shuangfeng shook his head and replied in embarrassment, No, I'm rank 5 now. What? Liao Shan shook his head repeatedly. He couldn't believe it, or rather he didn't want to believe it. When he went out this morning, this guy was only a rank 2 super-evolved dragon. When he came back at night, he was rank 5. In less than 12 hours he broke through to rank 3? However, judging from Shuangfeng's aura, he was indeed more than 10 times stronger than himself, a rank 4. Thinking about how this idiot Shuangfeng usually didn't know how to deceive people, he must be telling the truth. However, this guy broke through 3 levels consecutively. What's there to be ashamed of? This made Liao Shan even more shocked. *CK Shuangfeng, even a blockhead like you can be enlightened one day. Tell me, how did you break through? Shuangfeng smiled and shook his head. If I were to cultivate by myself, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to break through even if I died. It was Teacher Mo who helped me. Magus? Which Magus? Liao Shan was a little confused. Previously he didn't pay much attention to Immerse. He had only met him once 10 days ago. At that time he only knew that he was a teacher and didn't pay attention to his surname. In the past 10 days he had been indulging in wine and women. He had long forgotten about this so-called teacher. It's the teacher Mo who taught us the multiplication table. Shuangfeng, are you sure you're not joking? Liao Shan still felt that Shuangfeng was joking. That bastard teacher? Shuangfeng, you're playing with me. Liao Shan knew that Shuangfeng never lied. However, he couldn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. What he didn't want to believe wasn't that Shuangfeng had broken through 3 levels under that teacher's guidance. It was that he didn't want to believe that he had missed a great opportunity. Shuangfeng naturally didn't know what he was thinking. Instead he said seriously, No, it was Instructor Mo who guided me. He first let me practice it once, then guided me to practice it once. Then I broke through. Moreover, I only broke through 3 ranks. At this point Shuangfeng lowered his head in shame. Brother Jin broke through to the 4th level. Shuangfeng felt a little dizzy when he heard this. He kept shaking his head. No, I don't believe it. How can someone break through to the 4th level consecutively? This is definitely fake. That teacher is just playing a trick on you. At this moment another warrior walked in. Shuangfeng, has your cultivation stabilized? I broke through to the 3rd level and just stabilized my cultivation. Speaking of which, that Brother Jin is really a ruthless person. He broke through to the 4th level consecutively and stabilized his cultivation long ago. It seems that our talent is still lacking compared to his. When Liao Shan heard this, he felt his vision go dark. At the same time, there were nearly 1,000 other people who felt the same way. The entire camp was practically boiling. After hearing about the experiences of these 40 warriors, they were all filled with regret. Teacher Mo is a truly capable dragon. We were simply too stupid. We missed a great opportunity. Fortunately, we are still in Cloud Sea City. Early tomorrow morning we will go beg Teacher Mo and apologize to him. These dragons naively thought that Immerse would give them a chance. This was because they heard from the 40 warriors that Teacher Mo was a very nice person. Not only did he help them break through, but he also didn't take a single cent. In particular, he was very respectful to the dragon warriors. Therefore, at 6 o'clock the next morning, these 1,000 people had already gathered together and headed to Immerse's residence. Lakeside Villa. Chapter 635. The next day was a Sunday. Early in the morning, Immorse had yet to wake up. The 1,000 dragon warriors had already gathered at the plaza outside Immorse's lakeside villa. However, in order not to offend Immorse, they did not approach Immorse's villa. Instead, they sent a clever dragon warrior to ask around in front of Immorse's villa. The dragon warrior was called Zhou Xian. When he arrived at the villa's entrance, he saw a young man practicing his skills by the lakeside. He could not help but feel happy as he approached the young man. "May I ask if you know Teacher Immo?" The young man was naturally Lei Ren. He sized the guy up and down. He did not look like a student who was here to learn. He asked with some doubt, "Why are you looking for Teacher Immo?" Zhou Xian was also a smart person. He could tell at a glance that Lei Ren and Teacher Mo's relationship was not shallow. Thus he greeted him with a warm smile. "Hello, we are dragon warriors from the Eastern Front. We are here to cultivate under Teacher Mo's orders." Lei Ren had heard a little about them. His face immediately turned cold and he shook his head. "What do you take Teacher Immo for? Do you know how many people on Cloud Sea Planet are begging Teacher Immo to take them as his disciples? How many people have brought gifts to ask Teacher Immo to be their master? Now Teacher Immo is kind enough to teach you for free without taking a single cent. In the end, you don't even appreciate it. Don't worry, Teacher Immo will not give you a second chance." When Zhou Xian heard this, his heart sank. However, he did not give up. That was a chance to advance to rank 2 or even rank 4. He could live for 2,000 or even 4,000 years. How could he give up just like that? He still greeted Lei Ren with a smile. "Previously we were blind. We are not good people. Now we know we were wrong." Lei Ren sneered. "Some mistakes can only be made once in a lifetime. There is no second chance." Zhou Xian still had a humble smile on his face. "Brother, please make an exception and inform Teacher Immo. Even if he refuses, we want to hear it from Teacher Immo himself." Lei Ren snorted. "Teacher Immo is busy every day. He works until midnight. He still hasn't woken up." In truth, Immorse had indeed only gone to bed in the middle of the night, but he had been busy with Happy for half the night. Of course, with his current strength, even if he was tossed and turned in the middle of the night, he would still be energetic if he wanted to wake up early. However, what was the point of waking up early? He could not think of a reason to wake up early. Zhou Xian cupped his fists towards Lei Ren. "Many thanks, brother. In that case, we will wait for Teacher Immo to wake up." Therefore, Zhou Xian retreated and returned to the plaza. The soldiers in the square couldn't wait any longer. "How is it? Have you seen Mentor Immo? Did Instructor Immo agree? I heard that this Teacher Immo is a very good person. He won't disagree, right?" Zhou Xian frowned and shook his head slightly. Teacher Immo hasn't woken up yet. However, that person should be his disciple. From his attitude, it seems that Teacher Immo isn't too happy. The other giant dragons looked at each other and one of them said in relief, "As the saying goes, it's easy to get rid of the king of hell, but it's hard to deal with the little demons. Some fellows just rely on their master's power to show off. Let's see Mentor Immo first. Then we'll wait here for Teacher Immo to wake up." If the soldiers at the front line saw the current performance of these people, they would be shocked. One must know that many of these soldiers had very fiery tempers. They would often attack at the slightest disagreement. Now that they had suffered such humiliation in front of Teacher Immo, not only did they not have the slightest intention of retaliating, they even looked very humble. When it was around noon, Immorse finally woke up. After eating the breakfast that Lei Ren sent over, Immorse poured himself a cup of tea and went to the lakeside. He enjoyed the beautiful scenery of the lakeside while drinking his tea. "Brother Immo, have you seen those giant dragon warriors? They came early in the morning intending to apologize to you." Although Lei Ren didn't like the attitude of these giant dragon warriors towards Immorse, whether or not to teach them still depended on Immorse's opinion. He couldn't make the decision for Immorse. Immorse didn't even look at those giant dragon warriors. He drank a mouthful of tea and said, "Today's tea is not bad." His meaning was very clear. There was no need to bother about them. Lei Ren immediately nodded. "Brother Immo, do you have any plans for today?" Immorse laughed. "Even if there is, it is my plan. As for you, you should cultivate well, young man." Although Lei Ren couldn't go with Immorse, he still nodded. "And big brother Immo, I'll listen to you." Then he entered the courtyard and returned to his room to cultivate. This was completely different from his previous image as a hedonistic son. In the past, Lei Ren couldn't sit still after cultivating for 3 to 5 minutes. But ever since he met Immorse, he would cultivate for at least 5 hours a day. He would even cultivate for 2 to 3 days at a time. From afar, Shui Wugen saw Immorse come out. At the same time, he saw the person talking to Immorse. He knew that Lei Ren had already told Immorse about their situation. And Immorse didn't even glance in their direction. This was enough to show Immorse's attitude. Thinking of this, Shui Wugen's heart sank. But even so, he couldn't give up. He still called over 10 smarter warriors to come to the lakeside villa with him. They came to Immorse and knelt down on one knee in front of Immorse. Mentorimo, we were blind. Please forgive us. Mentorimo, we offended you previously. If you want to punish us, we will accept it. Mentorimo, we were wrong. We were so wrong. Now we know that we were wrong. Mentorimo, I memorized the multiplication table last night. Please enlighten me. However, Immorse didn't pay any attention to them from beginning to end. What a joke. A few days ago I took the initiative to teach you, but you treated my things like dog shit. Now seeing that the 40+ giant dragons had improved, they pounced on me again. Immorse hated such snobbish people the most. No matter what they said at the side, Immorse paid no attention to them. After he finished tasting the tea, he directly soared into the sky and flew towards the distance, quickly disappearing into the horizon. The dragon warriors looked at each other when they saw this. However, they didn't dare to show any dissatisfaction. After all, they were in the wrong first. Moreover, Mentorimo could really help a giant dragon advance to 4th grade in just a few minutes. This was enough to show Mentorimo's strength. Moreover, even the Star Lord respected Mentorimo. It was obvious how powerful and influential Mentorimo was. That was why they didn't dare to complain in front of Immorse. What do we do now? One of the dragon warriors asked. Wait. We wait until we die. Yes, we won't leave until Mentorimo agrees. Chapter 636. Immorse strolled around for an entire day. With his current ability, he could already reach 1% of the speed of light. He couldn't go anywhere. Within a day, he could travel through the entire Cloud Sea planet and hundreds of nearby planets. Actually, he didn't do anything serious for the day. He looked at the sea of clouds, enjoyed the volcanic eruptions, and witnessed a tsunami in the middle of the sea. Then he had a big meal on a floating island in the sea. Seeing that it was getting late, he returned to the lakeside villa. When he returned to the entrance of the lakeside villa, the nearly 1,000 dragon warriors were still in the square not far from the lakeside villa. It was obvious that they had been here the entire day without eating or drinking. When they saw Immorse coming from afar, they all stood up straight. When Immorse landed in front of the lakeside villa, Shui Wugen and the 9 clever dragon warriors all rushed over. Instructor Immo, Instructor Immo. Instructor Immo, we know we were wrong. Instructor Immo, please give us one last chance. However, Immorse just snorted coldly. I only give you one chance. After that, he ignored them and went straight into the lakeside villa. Shui Wugen and the dragon warriors looked at each other. What should we do? How about we wait until death? If my instructor doesn't agree, we won't leave. A dragon warrior suggested. The other dragon warriors all nodded. Then they returned to the square and continued to stand up straight. One had to admit that they were indeed very persistent. They stood there for the entire night. At noon the next day, when Immorse woke up, they were still standing in the square. However, Immorse still ignored them. They stood in the square for the entire day. This night they still stood straight for the entire night. Due to the long lifespan of dragon warriors, there were many legends about perseverance in dragon culture. As long as you persevered, it seemed that there was nothing you couldn't do. If one day wasn't enough, then 10 days. If 10 days weren't enough, then a year. If 1 year wasn't enough, then 100 years or 1,000 years. There would always be a time when you could do it. The next morning, they were prepared to continue standing there and waiting for Immorse. They believed that their perseverance would eventually move him. However, this morning, Star-Lord Kong Hai ordered the 1,000 soldiers to return to the Eastern Front as soon as possible and replace them with the next batch of soldiers. As a result, these soldiers were completely out of luck with this opportunity. They were all extremely dejected. The next afternoon, when they returned to the Eastern Front, the general of the Eastern Front summoned them for questioning. Why exactly did the Star-Lord send them to Ocean of Cloud City? When he asked this question, the Eastern Front's general was surprised to discover that over 40 dragon warriors had grown stronger. At the very least, they had reached Tier 2, with some even reaching Tier 4. As for the rest of the soldiers, their strength did not increase. After asking the general of the Eastern Front, they understood what had happened. He immediately scolded the soldiers who failed to seize this opportunity. He could have used this opportunity to increase his strength. In the end, these guys missed such an opportunity. Not only did they fail to improve their own strength, but the strength of the Eastern Front also failed to improve because of them. What a bunch of idiots. Then the general of the Eastern Front ordered that the soldiers be locked up for half a month and deduct half a year's worth of dragon coins from them. This was a warning to the rest of the warriors. The next morning he sent out the second batch of soldiers. The general of the Eastern Front did not discount this second batch of soldiers. Instead, he sent out 5,000 soldiers. Moreover, these 5,000 soldiers were all elites that he had handpicked. Most of them were Tier 5 evolved dragons. These soldiers were all very excited. When they left, the general of the Eastern Front gathered them together and gave them a lecture. All 5,000 of you, listen up. Every one of you must advance by at least 1 grade when you return. If you can't, you will be executed in public. His words were very strict. The soldiers were all shocked. However, since Instructor Mo had the ability to improve the strength of the other dragons, they would naturally advance by 1 grade as long as they did as Instructor Mo said. In just 1 short month, Mo sure had helped 15,000 soldiers advance by at least 1 grade. Moreover, the ones with the lowest potential had advanced by 1 grade. Most of them had advanced by 2 or even 3 grades. The one with the highest potential had advanced by 5 grades. He had gone from a Tier 5 evolved dragon to a Tier 10 evolved dragon. This was a terrifying improvement. On this day, a scout from the front lines came to report. General, bad news. The border city has fallen. The border city was a small city at the very front of the Eastern Front. As a matter of fact, this small city had no strategic significance. However, as the soldiers of the Eastern Front, they kept in mind the ancient motto, territory is sacred and inviolable. Those Hulong had occupied the border city. Naturally, they had to take it back. The general of the Eastern Front raised his eyebrows slightly. How many Hulong have come? About 100,000 of them. The general of the Eastern Front said without any hesitation, let those 15,000 soldiers deal with the 100,000 Hulong. The counselor next to him was a little worried. General, there are 100,000 Hulong. I don't think it's appropriate for us to only send 15,000 soldiers. Generally speaking, the strength of the dragon warriors was stronger than Hulong, but not by this much. 10,000 warriors could resist 15,000 Hulong at most. Now they were only sending 15,000 to deal with 100,000 Hulong. No wonder he was worried. However, the general of the Eastern Front shook his head. This is the only way to show the might of our Eastern Front army. Also, they only sent 100,000 people and dared to occupy our border city. Obviously, they have other plans. If too many of us leave here and the city is empty, can you guarantee that they won't take advantage of the situation and invade? The counselor nodded. General, you have foresight. I admire you. In the afternoon of the same day, the 15,000 soldiers left for the border city. At the same time, the 100,000 Hulong around and in the center of the border city were singing and dancing to their heart's content. A spy came to report, "Boss, it's bad. The Eastern Front army is here." The leader of the Hulong was a bearded man. Hearing the spy's report, he put down the wine cup in his hand and asked, "How many of them are here?" The spy replied, "Estimated to be around 15,000. The boss was a little stunned and then he burst out laughing. "They look down on us too much. They want to fight against 100,000 Hulong with only 15,000 soldiers? That's too childish. In this case, let's let them have a taste of our Hulong's power." Someone next to him said, "Boss, do they have any plans?" The bearded man waved his hand. "Even if they do, so what? Our mission this time is to lure them here. Our other brothers can take advantage of the situation and directly attack their general's mansion. This time we'll make them suffer a great loss and even kill their general directly." Hearing this, the crowd raised their weapons and roared angrily. "Kill the general and spread the glory of our long way. Kill the general and spread the glory of our long way. Kill the general and spread the glory of our long way." Chapter 637. When the 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front Army were 5 kilometers away from the border city, the 100,000 Hurons were already in position. In the past, whenever the Hurons encountered the Eastern Front Army, they would always split up and engage in guerrilla warfare. This time, however, they were preparing to fight the Eastern Front Army. This was very unusual. The captain of the 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front Army shouted at the Hurons from afar, "The Eastern Front Army is here. Why don't you surrender now? If you don't surrender, it will be too late for regrets." The bearded leader of the Hurons laughed. "So what if the Eastern Front Army is here? What's there to be afraid of? 15,000 soldiers coming to attack our 100,000 giant dragons. Aren't they just sending themselves to their deaths?" The captain of the Eastern Front Army sneered, "Since you don't want to listen, then die." Then he waved his flag and the 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front Army charged forward. When they charged over, they all transformed into their giant dragon forms. Each of the 15,000 giant dragons was 1,000 meters long. The sky was instantly filled with them. It was a spectacular scene. The 100,000 giant dragons thought that the Eastern Front Army had sent only 15,000 giant dragons over for some reason. There might even be an ambush in the dark, so they were already prepared. However, after some investigation, they found no ambush within a radius of tens of kilometers. This surprised the Hurons. Did the Eastern Front Army think that their 15,000 giant dragons could fight the 100,000 giant dragons? Apart from being surprised, the bearded man's eyes were filled with viciousness. Since they wanted to give their heads to him, it would be impolite to refuse. He then raised his right hand, intending to order the Hurons to attack. However, at this moment he paused for a moment. Strange. He felt that the strength of the Eastern Front Army seemed to have increased. The aura of the captain of the Eastern Front Army was no longer that of a 5th grade evolved giant dragon. He sensed it carefully and found that he couldn't tell what grade the captain's aura was. This meant that the captain was far more powerful than him. He was a 5th grade evolved giant dragon. That meant that the captain was most likely a 7th grade or even 8th grade evolved giant dragon. Thinking of this, he kept an eye out. He ordered the Hurons around him, set up the formation and act according to the situation. If you see something wrong, retreat immediately. The surrounding Hu dragons felt a little strange. Why did Boss suddenly become a coward? Why would 100,000 Hulong cower in the face of 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front? This didn't seem like Boss's personality. At this moment, those from the Eastern Army had arrived. They were fearless in the face of 100,000 Hu dragons. Their fangs and claws slashed at these Hulong. As soon as they attacked, the Hu dragons felt that something was wrong. They had been fighting guerrilla warfare for hundreds of years, so they were very familiar with the Eastern Front Army. However, the strength displayed by these 15,000 Eastern Front Army was far greater than before. That was not all. The aura of the captain of the Eastern Front Army instantly spread out and enveloped them, causing the energy in their bodies to circulate very slowly. It was obvious that the strength of this Eastern Line captain had increased a lot in a short period of time. Previously he was only a rank 5 evolved giant dragon, but now his strength had most likely reached the rank 7 or even the rank 8. This made the Hu dragons a little flustered. Just as they were panicking, the Eastern Front Army had already arrived, and the captain of the Eastern Front Army flew towards Hulong's boss. Seeing this, Hulong's boss hurriedly tried to escape. However, it was too late. The captain of the Eastern Front Army transformed into a giant dragon and lunged at Hulong's boss. Hulong's boss also transformed into a giant dragon, but he only had one goal: escape. That was because he could sense that this captain of the Eastern Front Army was not someone he could handle. However, it was too late. The captain of the Eastern Front Army stabbed his front claws into Hulong's back. He exerted some force and tore Hulong's body into 2 halves. Instant kill. As a result, the entire Hu dragon army was thrown into chaos. All the Hu dragons were in disbelief. Their boss had been dealing with the Eastern Front Army for many years. Both sides knew each other very well. They were both rank 5 evolved giant dragons. How could this captain of the Eastern Front Army kill their boss in an instant? Since their boss was already dead, they only had one choice: escape. The Hu dragons had been fighting guerrilla warfare all this time and lacked the ability to fight large-scale battles. If they had fought together in such a situation, they might have had a chance of winning. However, they scattered and fled and could only be hunted down by the Eastern Front Army. In this final battle, the Eastern Front Army had killed over 2,000 of the Hu dragons out of 15,000 of them. It was a pity that these Hulong were very cunning. Many of them had space attribute escape methods, so most of them were taken away by the Hulong. However, killing 2,000 of them was already the greatest victory they had achieved over the years. Over the years, the Hu dragons had split up and attacked everywhere. Even in the battles where the Eastern Front Army won, they had only killed 100 Hu dragons at most. A battle where 2,000 Hu dragons were killed had never happened before. Moreover, it was very difficult to obtain escape methods with spatial attributes, especially for these Hulong. They did not dare to trade openly in the market. Therefore, it was even more difficult for them to get their hands on such things. Now that they had used up their spatial escape techniques, they would not be able to escape the next time they ran into them. Therefore, these Hu dragons would stop for a while and the Eastern Front Army would be able to enjoy some peace. The general of the Eastern Front Army saw the results of this battle from the central control room. He was very satisfied. Only 15,000 of the Eastern Front Army had defeated 100,000 Hu dragons. This was indeed a great reputation for the Eastern Front Army. It made those Hu dragons fearful and at the same time, it foiled their conspiracy. That Mentor Imo was indeed powerful. It seemed that if he had the chance to return to Cloud Sea City in the future, he would have to pay a visit to Mentor Imo in person and express his gratitude. At the same time, in the lakeside villa, Immorse, who was tasting tea, suddenly heard a series of notifications in his mind. Dragon slaying value +1. Dragon slaying value +1. Dragon slaying value +1. When the notifications ended, Immorse looked at his dragon slaying value again. Dragon slaying value 203110000. You can level up. Do you want to level up now? Immorse was secretly delighted. This was really a case of leveling up while he was sitting at home. He had leveled up while he was tasting tea here. Well, this could work. Level up. Immorse said in his mind. Soon a notification came in Immorse's mind. Level up successful. At this time he looked at his attributes again. Name, Immorse. Level, Tier 1 Magician, Tier 8 Super Evolved Dragon. Ability. Click to expand. Phew. Immorse let out a long breath. Becoming a Tier 8 Super Evolved Dragon meant that he was one step closer to becoming an Ancient Dragon. As long as he became an Ancient Dragon, he would be able to do whatever he wanted. He had been keeping a low profile since coming to the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. He had been holding it in for a long time. Chapter 638. Since the Eastern Front Army had killed over 2,000 Hu dragons, the Hu dragons were much more restrained in the following days, and the Eastern Front was much more peaceful. Of course, the peace on the Eastern Front was not a good thing for Immorse. The more peaceful the Eastern Front was, the less dragon killing points he had. But even so, the Eastern Front Army still sent 5,000 dragons to Cloud Sea City to learn from Immorse every 10 days. Immorse still taught them the multiplication table before helping them break through. Gradually, the number of Immorse's students increased by the system. After more than 2 months, his students had already reached more than 30,000 people. At this time, Immorse hoped that a war would break out somewhere so that he could instantly level up. However, the entire Cloud Sea planet had been relatively peaceful recently, and there was no war at all. The Cloud Sea planet and the other planets also lived in harmony and there were no wars. This made Immorse speechless. He could only walk around aimlessly every day. He looked very relaxed, but no one knew the helplessness in his heart. On this day, Immorse was teaching students at the academy. A spaceship slowly descended above the Cloud Sea Academy. When the instructors of Ocean of Clouds Academy saw the symbol on the flying ship clearly, all of their expressions changed slightly. There was a dark green skull symbol on the spaceship. It looked a little strange and a little terrifying. This is a spaceship from the Myriad Poison Planet. The Myriad Poison Planet was notorious in the nearby star fields. There was poison everywhere on the Myriad Poison Planet. Plants were poisonous, animals were poisonous, microbes were poisonous, and even the air was poisonous. It was very difficult for ordinary dragons to survive on the Myriad Poison Planet, but for poison-type dragons, it was a treasure trove. Their cultivation there was twice the result with half the effort. So many poison-type dragons would eventually go to the Myriad Poison Planet. If such a planet developed, its strength would far surpass other planets. But poison-type dragons were very rare. Out of 100 dragons, only one poison-type dragon would appear. So the number of poison-type dragons was a big problem. So it was very difficult for them to develop. But even so, no one dared to casually provoke the Myriad Poison Planet. The master of the Myriad Poison Planet was a rank 7 super evolved dragon. It was very difficult to find a rank 7 super evolved dragon in the nearby star fields. Moreover, it was a rank 7 super evolved giant dragon with the poison attribute. This made it even harder to deal with. If they provoked him, one of his big moves would probably cause millions of corpses to fall. Therefore, the planets in the nearby star fields had formed a consensus that it was best not to provoke the giant dragons of the Myriad Poison Star for no reason. Only 2 people came down from the aircraft. Both of them had dyed their hair dark green and wore dark green eyeshadow. It gave people a very strange feeling. One of them said, "Big brother, is this Cloud Sea planet? You didn't go the wrong way, did you? Are you kidding? How can I get lost? I heard that planet Cloud Sea is a very beautiful planet, but why does this place make me feel so King uncomfortable? Nonsense. The air you breathed on the Myriad Poison Planet was beneficial to your body. Here there's no poison in the air at all. It's only natural that you feel uncomfortable." That's true. What kind of lousy planet is this? It's really annoying. Let's hurry up and leave with that person. As the 2 of them spoke, they completely ignored the teachers and students around them. After they finished speaking, they waved at a student. The student didn't dare to step forward. Instead, it was a teacher who blocked the student's path. "May I ask why the 2 of you have come to our Cloud Sea planet?" One of them said, "Just one thing. Where's that teacher Mo? We want to take him away." His words were very domineering. It gave people the feeling that no one would dare to stop them. Although the teacher was displeased, he didn't dare to show it on his face. These fellows weren't like ordinary bad guys. They didn't show their emotions on their faces and they acted without any rules. They did everything according to their whims. If they weren't careful, they could easily poison a large number of people. The teacher said, "I still need to report this matter to the dean. Please follow me." "What dean? We want to find that teacher Mo right now. Take me to him immediately." The 2 of them were rank 3 super evolved giant dragons. They naturally didn't care about the dean of the Cloud Sea Academy. Moreover, their purpose in coming to Cloud Sea Planet was to take Immorse away. They couldn't be bothered to deal with the dean. When the teacher heard this, he thought to himself, should he take them to see Immorse? If he took them to see him, who knew where they would take teacher Imo and what they would do? If he didn't take them to see him, they might kill all the students in the academy in a fit of anger. Fortunately, at this moment the dean appeared in time. The dean had naturally received the report that a flying ship from Myriad Poison Planet had appeared in the academy. He quickly rushed over and glanced at the 2 giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet. He cupped his fists and said, "Why have the 2 of you come to our Cloud Sea Academy?" The 2 men sized up the dean from head to toe. "Who are you?" "I'm the dean of the Cloud Sea Academy. You can tell me anything," the dean said with a smile on his face. However, the 2 of them waved their hands as if they were chasing a dog. Go away, go away. We're looking for Teacher Imo. Everyone else, get out of my way." The dean's face darkened. After being the dean for so many years, this was the first time someone spoke to him like this. However, he couldn't lose his temper in the face of these 2 fellows who were covered in poison. Helpless, the dean could only say to the teacher, "Take them to Teacher Mo." At the same time, he used his mind to send a voice transmission to Immorse. 2 giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet are looking for you. Do you want to avoid them in advance? Immorse replied indifferently, "Avoid what? Why should I avoid them? Let them come." The dean heard that Immorse didn't panic at all. Instead, he seemed to have a card up his sleeve. Only then did he feel relieved. Soon the 2 of them were brought to Immorse by the teacher. At this moment, Immorse was watering the flowers at the door of his office. He was living a very leisurely life now. He was either tasting tea or watering flowers. In the eyes of the other giant dragons, he was as leisurely as a god. The 2 green-furred Myriad Poison Star Dragons looked Immorse up and down. One of them asked, "Your Teacher Imo?" Immorse didn't look at them and continued watering the flowers. At the same time, he replied indifferently, "That's right." The other Myriad Poison Planet giant dragon shook his head. He looks very ordinary. Who cares? Anyway, the Star Lord asked us to take him back. We just need to complete the mission. Then come with us. The two of them spoke as if they were talking to a criminal. And they didn't care about Immerse's feelings at all. Immerse chuckled. If I go just because you ask me to, wouldn't I lose face? The teacher who followed them couldn't help but change his expression slightly. He whispered to Immerse, Teacher Mo and the others are giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet. Be careful. Chapter 639. When the two dragons saw that Immerse did not take their words seriously, they snorted coldly. A mere teacher is a frog at the bottom of a well. He doesn't understand the power of our dragons. The other dragon waved his hand impatiently. What's the point of talking so much with him? Just take him away. Seeing this, the dean hurriedly stood in front of Immerse. The two of you can talk things out. If you really want to take Teacher Mo away, you should at least get our Star Lord's permission. After all, Teacher Mo is a member of our Cloud Sea planet and is very important to us. However, before the dean could finish his words, his face suddenly turned green. This green color quickly spread from his face to his veins, forming dark green lines that looked like the veins of a leaf. The dean, a rank 2 super-evolved dragon, was poisoned in an instant. The other teacher was shocked and wanted to save the dean, but the dean took a step back and said hoarsely, Don't touch me, there's poison. Only then did the teacher retract his hand. The giant dragon from the Myriad Poison Star didn't pay any attention to the dean and strode towards Immerse. Teacher Mo, leave quickly, don't worry about us, leave quickly. The dean knew that Immerse had spatial abilities. If he wanted to escape, no one could stop him. Hearing this, the dragon of the Myriad Poison Star chuckled. The space within 100 kilometers has already been locked by our space lock chains. None of you can escape. Then he placed his right hand on Immerse's shoulder. However, at that moment, bang! The Myriad Poison Star Dragon's body exploded into a bloody mist. There was no warning at all. Not only was the other Myriad Poison Star Dragon shocked, but even the dean and the others were shocked. Seeing this, the other Myriad Poison Star Dragon glared at Immerse fiercely. You dare kill my Myriad Poison Star Dragon? Courting death. As he spoke, a dark green smoke quickly spread out from his body. As the smoke spread, the leaves around him withered and rotted. Even the ground under his feet was covered in a layer of black. Even the ground was rotting quickly. Have you ever seen animals rot, plants rot, and soil rot? But at this moment, as the smoke spread out from his body, the ground under his feet was rapidly rotting. From this, it could be seen how toxic the smoke was. However, at this moment, bang! Just like before, the poisonous giant dragon's body quickly exploded into a bloody mist. As his body exploded, the rotten ground finally stopped spreading. Although there was still some residual dark green smoke ahead, Immerse completely ignored it. He walked up to the principal. He reached out and patted the dean's shoulder. The dean quickly dodged and said, Don't touch me. I've been poisoned. However, Immerse's hand was already on his shoulder. In the next moment, a warm energy entered his body and quickly spread through his 8 extraordinary meridians. As this energy spread, he felt as if he was being illuminated by the sun. His entire body felt warm. After a short 3 minutes, the black color on his face quickly faded. When Immerse withdrew the energy from his body, he no longer felt the cold sensation of being poisoned. It's fine now, Immerse said. The dean looked at his hands and legs from head to toe. The instructor next to him also said in disbelief, The dean is fine. The dean hurriedly cupped his fist to Immerse. Instructor Mo, thank you. I can't repay you for saving my life. Immerse did not wait for him to finish and waved his hand. We're all colleagues. There's no need to say anything unnecessary. The dean nodded but then said, Instructor Mo, now that we've killed these two, if Myriad Poison Planet pursues the matter, we'll be in big trouble. Immerse shook his head. Isn't it better if they pursue the matter? We can destroy Myriad Poison Planet while we're at it. The dean and the instructor looked at each other. Destroy Myriad Poison Planet while they're at it? Wasn't it too easy for him to say that? However, looking at Instructor Mo's strength, the 2 giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet exploded into a bloody mist without even moving a finger. Even the dean, a rank 2 super-evolved giant dragon, did not know how Immerse did it. However, in his heart, Immortal's status had risen by another level. He had thought that Immortal was only a 5th or 6th grade supervolved giant dragon. Now it seemed he was wrong. Very wrong. Let alone a 6th grade ultra-volved dragon, even a 10th grade ultra-volved dragon couldn't do what Immortal had just done. He didn't even need to lift a finger to kill 2 3rd grade ultra-volved dragons in an instant. When they thought of this, the two of them felt that Instructor Mo might actually be able to destroy Myriad Poison Planet while he was at it. How powerful was Instructor Mo? He was probably an ancient dragon at the very least. The two of them looked at each other again when they thought of the ancient dragon. Ancient dragons. They were existences that only existed in legends. They had not seen a single ancient dragon in the entire Cloud Sea planet, not including the entire Myriad Dragon Star region. Now there was an ancient dragon hiding in Cloud Sea Academy. It felt like a dream to them. Immortal did not think much of the 2 dragons after he killed them. In fact, he was even looking forward to it. Everyone from Myriad Poison Planet, come find me. The more people that came, the better. At the same time on Myriad Poison Planet's master, Zhou Xian, was with several women with perfect figures and perfect faces. They were admiring the beautiful scenery of Myriad Poison Planet. Myriad Poison Heart Poison was extremely poisonous, but one had to admit that the scenery here was indeed beautiful. Moreover, it was the most beautiful star among the hundreds of nearby star regions. At this moment, a giant dragon came to report, "Master, bad news." Zhou Qianhua frowned. "Can't you see that I'm busy?" Scram. The giant dragon's heart trembled and he hurriedly retreated. After another 2 hours, Zhou Qianhua had finished admiring the scenery and returned to his poison palace. The giant dragon came to report again, "Master, bad news. Du Pingji and Du Yueji's life sensors have turned black." There was a type of life sensor in the Myriad Dragon Star region. No matter how far away you were, it could sense your life. Normally, the life sensor would be green, indicating that the life was normal. However, when the target was injured, the life sensor would turn red. When the target died, the life sensor would turn black. When Zhou Qianhua heard this, his face sank. Why didn't you report when the life sensor turned red? If they had reported it at that time, they might have been able to save the two of them. The reporting giant dragon shook his head. It didn't change. It turned from green to black in an instant. When Zhou Qianhua heard this, he frowned. If it didn't turn red, it meant that the two of them had been killed in an instant without being injured. He slammed the table beside him. Preposterous, investigate. Chapter 640. Recently, Cloud Sea Planet seemed to be peaceful and uneventful. Star-Lord Kong Hai was a soldier, and after he took office he paid attention to strengthening the military. Coupled with the fact that Immortal had increased the military's combat strength, the Hu dragons didn't dare to attack everywhere. Therefore the 4 seas were peaceful and peaceful. However, on this day no one noticed that over 10 scouts from Myriad Poison Planet had mixed in with the people who came to Cloud Sea Planet. Scouts were people who specially went to other planets to investigate everything about that planet. Or they would carry out some special missions on other planets. They would usually disguise themselves as tourists or merchants to travel between planets. They had all received a high degree of professional training, so it was very difficult for ordinary people to distinguish them. As soon as they arrived at Cloud Sea Star, they headed straight for Cloud Sea City. Because the 2 scouts had come to invite Immortal to Cloud Sea Planet, their mysterious deaths were definitely related to Cloud Sea City. It didn't take long for those scouts who'd disguised themselves as tourists to spread throughout the city. It had to be said that they were very good at gathering information. In just 5 days they had gathered enough information in the huge city. Even though the Star-Lord knew that Immortal had killed the 2 dragons of Cloud Sea Planet and had been emphasizing that it must be kept a secret, these scouts still used all sorts of methods. They were bribed or threatened, and they were always able to get the information they needed. In the end, not only did they manage to gather enough information, they even managed to obtain the video of Immortal killing the 2 talent scouts in seconds. Among the 10 scouts, the leader was called the Inspector. When the Inspector showed the video to the rest of the talent scouts, they were all horrified. He didn't even have to do anything to kill them? Could he be in existence even stronger than the Long Yanshi? The legendary Long Yanshi. Many people think that the Long Yanshi really exist. In fact, the Long Yanshi is just a legend. There is no such thing as the Long Mianshi in history. Once Dragon Sense reaches level 10, the Long Mianshi won't be able to level up anymore. As for us giant dragons, our bodies are extremely tough. It would be child's play to think that you can kill a giant dragon with just your dragon will. Then what's going on? None of these talent scouts had any clue. Why don't we report this to the Star Master first and let him make a decision? This suggestion was unanimously approved by everyone, and the inspector made the final decision. Soon they reported the matter to the Star Master and sent the video. The Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet frowned slightly when he saw the video. Based on his experience, Immorse should have used some kind of spatial technique. The space attribute giant dragon had many unimaginable skills. For example, they could use space collapse. When the space collapsed, any creature in the space would instantly explode, just like in the video. However, you wouldn't be able to see any signs of space collapsing from the outside because space was formless and formless. He only knew that Immorse had many attributes, but he didn't expect him to have the space attribute as well. In the end, the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet made up his mind. Let Du Kong go. He must bring him back. Du Kong was a general under the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet. She was one of those rare dual attribute dragons. Not only did she have the poison attribute, but she also had the space attribute. The combination of the poison attribute and the space attribute allowed her to be far more powerful than other dragons of the same grade. Under normal circumstances, a 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon like him could easily kill a 6th grade ultra-evolved dragon. That was why the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet was somewhat wary of Du Kong, even though he was a 6th grade ultra-evolved dragon. Du Kong was a female dragon with a seductive figure. She was one of those dragons who looked seductive but whose entire body was filled with poison. Even though she had many admirers on the Myriad Poison Planet, none of these admirers dared to pursue her. What a joke. Who would dare to touch a dragon covered in poison? Moreover, she was a 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon. Her power had already surpassed 99.9% of all dragons. Think about it. Few really became a couple with her. If someone else's girlfriend got angry, she would either ignore them or argue with them. If Du Kong got angry, she would silently poison you. This was going to cost him his life. Before Du Kong set off, the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet warned him, "Your target is a dragon with many attributes. Moreover, he also has the space attribute. You must be careful." Du Kong smiled seductively. "You must be joking, Star Lord. The most powerful innate talent in history only had 3 attributes. Do you think he has many attributes?" The Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet nodded. "Of course. I also know that the most powerful innate talent in history only had 3 attributes. The reason he has so many attributes is very likely because he has used some sort of trick. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, poison, ice and space. He has shown all of these attributes before." Du Kong chuckled when he heard this. That only means he is lucky to be able to obtain skill items with these attributes. However, no matter how many skill items with these attributes he has, they are not his own attributes. So don't worry, Star Lord. Hee hee. Du Kong smiled seductively at the end of his speech. Even the Star Lord Du Qianhua felt like he couldn't take it anymore. In truth, Du Qianhua had a bad impression of Du Kong since a long time ago. However, he was a very cautious person, including when it came to pursuing women. When he understood Du Kong, he dismissed the idea of pursuing him. Even though he was the Star Lord, he was not to be trifled with. If he provoked Du Kong, he might not even know how he died. Du Kong might only be a 4th grade super-evolved dragon, but if he used his unique attribute and the space attribute at the same time, it would be easy for him to kill a 6th grade poison dragon. Soon Du Kong left the Myriad Poison Planet. He blended into the tourists of the Cloud Sea Planet. As the most powerful talent scout on the Myriad Poison Planet, her disguise skills were also very strong. First, she tampered with her appearance. Her true appearance was simply too alluring. If she were to become a talent scout, she would attract too much attention. Thus, she first disguised herself as a very ordinary woman. He then arrived at the Cloud Sea Planet. After arriving at the Cloud Sea Planet, he went straight to the Cloud Sea City. After meeting up with the other talent scouts, he quickly found Immorse's residence. On this evening, Immorse was sitting on a rocking chair by the lake, slowly rocking. The setting sun spread across the surface of the lake, dyeing it crimson. The bamboo forest by the lake was also dyed crimson. In addition to the clouds in the sky being dyed pink, it was as if the entire world had been dyed crimson. A crimson woman slowly walked out from this crimson scene. Chapter 641. Under the crimson sunset, a woman in a pink dress slowly walked over on the path by the crimson lake. This woman's face was definitely comparable to Happy's, and her figure was comparable to Emma's. What was the ceiling of pure lust? Immorse felt that this woman was it. This woman slowly walked towards Immorse. She had a charming smile on her face. With such a face, such a figure and such a charming smile, not many men would reject her. I am Du Kong from the Myriad Poison Star. If Instructor Imo is free, please come with me. He didn't have any ruthlessness on his face. Instead, he gave people the urge to fall in love with him. Immorse looked at this woman with a faint smile on his face. All right, I'll go with you. Du Kong was slightly stunned when he heard this. Then he shook his head. He thought that it was some ruthless character that he had to deal with personally. He didn't expect that he would be moved with just one sentence. He was really disappointed. In fact, after Immorse killed the 2 envoys from the Myriad Poison Star, he knew that the Myriad Poison Star Lord wouldn't let it go. He would definitely send more people over. However, he didn't expect that the Myriad Poison Star Lord would send a woman. However, it didn't matter whether it was a man or a woman. As long as it was a human, he would go with them and destroy the Myriad Poison Star. Otherwise, even if he killed this woman, the Myriad Poison Star would still send more people over. Moreover, they would be stronger and more numerous. Troublesome. He might as well go with them and destroy the entire Myriad Poison Star in one go. According to Immorse's understanding, the Myriad Poison Star had about 50,000 poison attribute giant dragons. It should be enough for him to advance to rank 10. He might even be able to advance to become an ancient giant dragon. When he thought about ancient giant dragons, Immorse felt a little excited. Du Kong saw that Immorse had already stood up. He smiled charmingly and said, "Let's go." Immorse shouted towards the villa behind him, "Lei Ren, I'm going to the Myriad Poison Star. I'll be back in 1 or 2 days or at most 1 or 2 months. Don't let anyone find me, understand?" Lei Ren, who was cultivating in the courtyard, was shocked when he heard Immorse's shout. Myriad Poison Star? Big Brother Imo is actually going to the Myriad Poison Star? This was incredible. He quickly jumped out of the courtyard. Immorse waved his hand at her and flew to the aircraft in the sky with the woman. Lei Ren cursed in his heart. At this moment he couldn't catch up. Even if he caught up, there was nothing he could do. He could only inform the dean of this news as soon as possible. The expressions of the dean and the others also changed drastically. Lei Ren, are you sure Instructor Imo left with a smile on his face? Lei Ren nodded. Also, he said that he would be going to Myriad Poison Star for at least a day or 2 or at most a month. He told us not to look for him. The dean looked at the other instructors and pondered for a moment. Finally he said, I think Instructor Imo must have his own plans. With Instructor Mo's strength we shouldn't worry about him. Perhaps he just wants to go to Myriad Poison Planet to broaden his horizons. As for those people on Myriad Poison Planet wanting to harm him, I don't think that's possible. Instructor Imo has mastered all kinds of attributes, especially the time and space attributes. It won't be that easy for those people from the Myriad Poison Star to kill him. Should we inform the Star Master about this? The Star Master is also Instructor Mo's disciple. He has the right to know. Of course, we must inform the Star Master about this. Thus, the dean reported this matter to the Star Master Kong Hai. When Kong Hai heard about this, he was shocked at first. Then he quickly gathered his strategists for a discussion. However, after much discussion, the outcome was the same as what the dean had said. Since Immorse had been so confident at the time, they didn't need to panic. Moreover, Kong Hai had absolute trust in Instructor Imo. He believed that with Instructor Mo's ability, if the Myriad Poison Star tried to force him to stay, the Myriad Poison Star would suffer in the end. At the same time, Immorse and Du Kong had already boarded the spaceship in the sky. Du Kong said with a hint of mockery, "Did you just say that it would take at least a day or 2 or at most a month or 2 to return?" Immorse nodded and asked seriously, "Is there something wrong?" Du Kong chuckled. "Let me tell you a secret. No one who goes to Myriad Poison Star leaves alive. After he finished speaking, he looked at Immerse's face as if he wanted to see a trace of fear on Immerse's face. However, Immerse only responded with a simple, "Oh." Then he turned his head to admire the beautiful scenery below. This slightly surprised Dukong. This guy seemed to have a card up his sleeve. However, it was obvious that this guy wasn't confident. He was just blindly arrogant. What kind of place was Myriad Poison Star? Among the hundreds of planets nearby, Myriad Poison Star was like hell. Even if you were a rank 5, 6, or 7 super evolved dragon, so what? Even the air on Myriad Poison Star was poisonous. Once you arrived at Myriad Poison Star, you would be poisoned. The energy in your body would be very sluggish. If you forced it, your meridians would break and you would die. Under such circumstances, even if you were strong, what could you do? The distance from Myriad Poison Star to Cloud Sea Planet was quite far. If they flew there directly, it would take at least 3 to 4 days. However, in highly developed space civilizations, there were wormholes connecting them. These wormholes were called Big Bug Bridges. Immerse and Dukong took the spaceship and arrived at the Big Bug Bridge closest to Cloud Sea Planet. After paying 1,000 dragon coins, they passed through the Big Bug Bridge and arrived at the Big Bug Bridge near Myriad Poison Star. After flying for another half an hour, they finally arrived at Myriad Poison Star. As soon as they entered Myriad Poison Star's atmosphere, they could see that the entire Myriad Poison Star was shrouded in clouds of various colors. There were red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, white, and gray. If one looked at Myriad Poison Star from space, it would look like a big colorful ball. They passed through a large purple cloud. When they looked at the ground again, they saw that the ground below was covered with mountains and trees. Almost all of these trees were purple. However, the degree of purple varied. Some were deep purple, some were light purple, and some were purplish red. Even the water of a large lake below was purple. After passing through this purple forest, they arrived at a golden plain. Everything here seemed to be golden in color. All the trees and flowers were golden in color, including the lake water. Immerse had learned that this was because there were microbes of various colors in the lake water. Therefore, from above it looked like the lake water was the same color. At the center of this golden plain was a city. The scale of this city was far inferior to Cloud Sea Planet's Cloud Sea Planet. After all, Cloud Sea Planet had over 50 million people living in it. The total population of Myriad Poison Star was only around 50,000. Chapter 642. On the Golden Grassland, a golden city rose from the ground. Of course, this city wasn't as majestic or massive as Cloud Sea City. The city's exterior was also a dazzling golden color. The streets, the roads, the houses, and even the moat around the city were golden in color. Immerse was speechless at this sight. Wasn't it boring to see nothing but gold from the moment you opened your eyes in the morning until the moment you closed them at night? Immerse scanned the city with his magical will and discovered that the most powerful creature in the city was a 7th grade super-evolved dragon. That person was probably Star Lord Zhou Xian of Myriad Poisons. According to historical records, Myriad Poisons was still an undeveloped planet 2,000 years ago. Very few dragons would come to this planet. Even dragons with the poison attribute wouldn't come to this planet. That was because this planet was simply too dangerous. Even if you played with poison, you might lose your life if you weren't careful. Only those fugitives who were wanted by various planets and had nowhere else to go would escape to this place. Slowly, more and more fugitives appeared. When they discovered the terror of Myriad Poisons, these fugitives had no choice but to band together for protection. They started to band together and slowly formed an army with combat power. Slowly, more and more people appeared, and so did the army. Finally, there were over 70,000 dragons in total. As the saying went, where there were humans, there was a society. Where there were dragons, there was also a society. As more and more armies appeared, these armies often fought each other for the sake of profit. Everyone was a fugitive. There was no reason to reason with each other. Profit was everything here. That was until Dragon Zhou Xian appeared 2,000 years ago. Back then he was only a 5th grade super-evolved dragon. However, even a 5th grade super-evolved dragon was an invincible existence on the planet at the time. Thus, he led 2 of his subordinates and started to recruit these armies. Anyone who wasn't willing to join them was exterminated. In the end, only 50,000 dragons were left on the planet. These 50,000 dragons were all recruited by him. After their construction, they finally built a city on the plains. The City of Myriad Poisons. When their City of Myriad Poisons was built, the government came looking for them. However, this time the government wasn't here to capture them. They were too powerful and they were backed by Myriad Poison Planet, a planet full of danger. If they wanted to capture them, they would have to pay a huge price. He might as well make Du Qianhua the Star Lord and let him manage these fugitives. The final outcome was indeed very satisfactory to the officials. Du Qianhua accepted their conferment. At the same time, under Du Qianhua's management, these fugitives almost never left Myriad Poison Planet. This was the history of the Myriad Poisons Planet's Myriad Poisons City. However, Du Qianhua's ambition did not stop there. Who wouldn't want to go to those highly developed civilized planets to enjoy themselves? Compared to those highly developed civilized planets, the Myriad Poison Planet was like a barren wasteland. Apart from the Myriad Poison City, which was barely worth looking at, the other places were filled with trepidation. However, if you want to develop on other planets, you will need strength. The increase in strength was firstly based on the increase in the level of the dragons, and secondly based on the number of dragons. Now that there was no way to increase the number of dragons in a short period of time, he could only let the dragons under him increase their strength as soon as possible. Therefore, when he heard that there was a mentor Immerse who could raise any dragon's level by 1 or even 5 levels in a short period of time, he sent someone to look for Immerse. Immerse followed Du Kong into the Myriad Poison City. Only then did he realize that his previous thoughts were completely unnecessary. Although the Myriad Poison City looked completely golden on the outside, in fact, after entering the city, he realized that the inside of the city was not much different from an ordinary city. They might have used some kind of high-tech method to make the city look golden on the outside. Walking on the streets of the Myriad Poison City, the people coming and going were all like the non-mainstream people Immerse had seen on Earth. Some had red hair, some had green hair, and some had yellow hair. People who didn't know better would think that the traffic lights had turned into spirits. Some had very dark eyeshadow, some had green eyeshadow, and some had purple eyeshadow. Their clothes were also brightly colored. Immerse thought to himself that in the natural world, the brighter the color of a creature, the more poisonous it was. When these people looked at Immerse, they seemed to be harboring evil intentions. Through their memories, Immerse knew that the Myriad Poison Star had a method of refining poison using living people. These people obviously treated themselves as ingredients for refining poison. However, when they saw Du Kong walking beside Immerse, they quickly retracted their gazes. Du Kong was a famous character on the Myriad Poison Star. In the past, countless men had designs on him, but they all disappeared without a trace. Many people said that those men were refined into poison by him. Immerse followed Du Kong all the way to the Myriad Poison Palace at the center of the Myriad Poison City. Because Du Kong was leading him, he was able to pass through without any obstructions until they reached the Myriad Poison Hall at the center of the Myriad Poison Palace. After being notified, the Myriad Poison Star's Star Lord, Du Qianhua, arrived at the Myriad Poison Hall. A group of civil and military officials stood on both sides. Du Qianhua praised Du Kong first. "Sure enough, it's still the Poison Lady. Thank you for your hard work, Poison Lady. Please take a seat." Very quickly, the servants brought over 2 chairs. The Poison Lady, Du Kong, chuckled and sat not far away from Du Qianhua. Du Qianhua sized up Immerse from head to toe with a face full of joy and said with a sincere smile, "Instructor Imo is finally here. My 2 subordinates were insensible and offended Instructor Imo. Please don't blame them." Immerse chuckled, "It's fine." Du Qianhua continued, "This time, I invited Instructor Imo here mainly to ask Instructor Imo to help us raise the strength of the residents of the Myriad Poison Star." The civil and military officials already knew that Immerse could raise their strength, and at this moment, all of them had looks of anticipation in their eyes. Immerse chuckled and asked, "What happens after I help you raise your strength?" "Of course, we will reward Instructor Imo handsomely. Whatever Instructor Imo wants, feel free to tell us as long as we can do it." Immerse smiled, "You don't want to kill me?" The moment these words came out, Du Qianhua's face turned cold. In fact, that was what he had in mind. First, he would ask Immerse to raise the strength of all the residents of the Myriad Poison Star, and after that he would kill Immerse. He couldn't allow Immerse to raise the strength of the residents of other planets. Immerse knew this through plundering Du Qianhua's memories. At this moment, Du Qianhua also removed his disguise. You're right. After you raise our strength you have two choices, one is to stay on the myriad poison star, the other is to die. Immerse chuckled, and if I say no? Chapter 643. What if I say no? Immerse asked with a chuckle. Du Qianhua did not seem angry at all. If Instructor Imo says no, then there is no problem. Don't worry, we are all civilized dragons, we will not be rough with you. Men. Following Du Qianhua's voice, two soldiers came down from the hall. They brought a person with them. That person was covered in blood from head to toe. The blood in some places had dried for a long time and had turned black. In other places, it was obvious that the wounds had just appeared and fresh blood was still flowing out. However, with the self-healing ability of dragons, the wounds had quickly scabbed over after a minute. Du Qianhua smiled and waved his hand, and the two soldiers immediately pressed down on the dragon. Then they reached out and pressed on the scab that had just formed on the dragon's wound and tore it open. The dragon's wound immediately tore open again. Ah! A heart-wrenching roar erupted from the dragon's throat. After a minute the wound scabbed over again. The two soldiers once again pressed on the scab that had just formed and tore it apart. Ah! A huge roar erupted from the dragon's throat, reverberating in the entire hall. This was repeated 3 times and the dragon was already curled up in pain. During this process, the civil and military officials in the hall did not have any sympathy or pity. Instead, they all looked like they were watching a show. Du Qianhua smiled and explained to Immerse, "This person snuck into our 1,000-poison planet a month ago and tried to steal our secrets. After he was discovered, he was punished like this. We will make him beg for death and make him suffer 100 times a day." Instructor Imo, did you enjoy watching it? After Du Qianhua finished speaking, the civil and military officials looked at Immerse with ridicule and mockery in their eyes. They seemed to be impatient to see Immerse's terrified expression. However, Immerse chuckled. It's just as if. The moment he said this, the civil and military officials were slightly shocked. How could this guy still be so calm? Du Qianhua was also very surprised. He had seen a lot of people who looked tough on the outside, but in the face of a life and death threat, they would basically give in instantly. However, this Instructor Imo actually laughed and said something in the face of such a threat. He carefully observed Immerse's expression, trying to see if he was pretending to be calm. However, he did not see any trace of pretense in Immerse's expression. However, in addition to being surprised, he was also a little angry in his heart. He had been the master of the myriad poison star for more than 1,000 years. In the past 1,000 years he had been the only king on myriad poison planet. Even the official emissaries had to be polite to him when they came to myriad poison planet. However, this guy was clearly captured and brought to myriad poison planet, yet he was still so arrogant. How preposterous. He didn't even take me, the master of myriad poison planet, seriously. Men. Du Qianhua growled. Yes. Immediately, another 10 warriors came to the hall. Every warrior had the strength of a Tier 4 super-evolved giant dragon. Du Qianhua looked at Immerse and snorted coldly. Since Instructor Imo doesn't want to accept the toast, then he will accept the punishment. Then he waved his hand and the 10 warriors strode towards Immerse. Colorful energy appeared in each of their hands. In terms of color, these energies were not like the reserved colors of the metal, wood, water, fire and earth energies. The colors of these energies were very exaggerated. Red was blood red, green was bright green. Each color was as exaggerated and bright as possible, making people feel uncomfortable just by looking at them. It was obvious that they were all poison-attributed energies. Not all poison-type energies were dark green in color. In the natural world there were thousands of poison-attributed energies. And these giant dragons focused on the poison attribute, so their energy would appear that color. These 10 warriors were Du Qianhua's 10 poison guards. After Du Qianhua became the master of the myriad poison guards, he trained a total of 20 poison guards. They were responsible for his personal safety. Each poison guard was a Tier 3 super-evolved giant dragon. These 20 poison guards could be said to be the strongest force on myriad poison planet. It was no exaggeration to say that with these 20 poison guards, it would be easy for him to take over a city. Du Qianhua knew that Immerse was a Tier 3 super-evolved giant dragon, So he sent out his 10 poison guards. But these 10 poison guards were only 3 meters away from Immerse. Boom! 10 explosions were heard all of a sudden. These 10 explosions sounded almost at the same time, so it sounded like one. Then these 10 people turned into 10 clouds of blood mist. But the blood mist was not blood red. Instead, it was the same as their energy. There were all kinds of colors: bright green, blood red, purplish black, and bright yellow. In an instant, the blood mist of all kinds of colors enveloped Immerse. Immerse was completely enveloped. Immerse waved his sleeves lightly and scattered the blood mist. The entire hall fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at Immerse as if they were looking at a monster. Many people's eyes were filled with deep fear, and some people were surprised. Du Qianhua's face turned cold. How did this guy do it? He did not even move, and the poison guards around him all exploded. This was completely beyond Du Qianhua's understanding and knowledge. Could it be a spatial skill? From what Du Qianhua knew, Immerse had skills of various attributes. Thinking of this, he hurriedly shouted, "Du Kong, I'm right here." A voice suddenly sounded in front of him, and the next moment, Du Kong's alluring figure slowly appeared. Du Kong was a Tier 6 super-evolved giant dragon with both poison and spatial attributes. She glanced at the blood mist that had yet to completely disperse, then looked at Immerse. "It seems that I underestimated you before." She had wanted to forcefully bring Immerse back, but before she could do anything, Immerse was mesmerized by her appearance and took the initiative to follow her. This had disappointed her, thinking that Immerse was just an old pervert. She never expected that Immerse would instantly kill 10 poison guards as soon as he arrived. In just 1 second, 10 Tier 4 super-evolved giant dragons had been killed. Du Kong could do it herself. Now that Immerse could do it as well, she was naturally interested in Immerse. "If you listen to the Star Lord, I can spare your life." Du Kong still had that charming smile on her face. At the same time, she secretly took precautions in the space around her to prevent Immerse from using another spatial skill to attack her. However, just as she finished speaking, bang! Her entire body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The dark green blood even splattered on the faces of the ministers near her. At this moment, the expressions of all the ministers changed drastically. Even the Star Lord of Myriad Poisons, Du Qianhua, was shocked. Chapter 644. Immerse didn't even need to lift a finger to deal with those poison guards. He was able to kill them in an instant. This was barely acceptable. However, even the 6th grade super-evolved dragon Du Kong had been killed by Immerse in an instant. He still didn't even need to lift a finger. That was unbelievable. The expressions of all the poison dragons who had been dismissive of Immerse changed drastically. Even their star master Du Qianhua was shocked. That's impossible. Du Kong is a 6th grade super-evolved dragon. Moreover, he has both air and poison attributes. This guy is too terrifying. Terror appeared in Du Qianhua's eyes when he saw this. He put on a brave front and shouted at Immerse, "You have been poisoned by at least 30 different poisons since the moment you entered Myriad Poison's planet. If you dare kill us, who can cure you of your poison?" Boom! Du Qianhua had just finished speaking when he exploded into a cloud of blue blood mist. Moreover, his blue blood spread in every direction, enveloping all the dragons present. The more than 30 civil and military officials present all trembled violently. It was important to note that Du Qianhua was a 6th grade super-evolved dragon. Ever since he entered Myriad Poison's planet, he had started off as a dog. He slowly recruited other teams and finally became the Star Master, ruling over Myriad Poison's planet for over 2,000 years. It wasn't hard to imagine how powerful he was. However, he never expected to explode into a cloud of blood mist without being able to put up any resistance in front of this guy. Just how powerful was this guy? Even a 7th grade, 8th grade, or even a 9th grade super-evolved dragon wouldn't be able to stand still and kill a 6th grade super-evolved dragon with a single finger. Moreover, as the Star Master, Du Qianhua must have collected at least 10 life-saving measures over the years. Yet they were all useless against this guy. That meant he was very likely a 10th grade super-evolved dragon. No. Even a rank 10 super-evolved WM couldn't kill a rank 6 super-evolved WM that had dozens of life-saving means in seconds without even moving a finger. Could he be one of the legendary primordial dragons? The legendary primordial dragons? Heavens! These people had no idea what primordial dragons were. They only knew that primordial dragons were above 10th grade super-evolved dragons. But they had never seen it. Only the history books had records of ancient dragons. Furthermore, it was only in ancient myths and legends in the history books that ancient dragons appeared. It was said that the ancient dragons could easily destroy a planet. Judging from the current situation, this guy did not even need to lift a finger to kill so many people. This meant that he was undoubtedly an ancient dragon. At the thought of this, the dragons all turned pale. This guy wasn't even afraid of being poisoned by dozens of poisons, so it was obvious that he had some kind of method to deal with them. If that was the case, wouldn't they be bringing a fiend to the myriad poison star by force? In the midst of the terror, a giant dragon said while trembling, "Sir Senior, all of this was the Star Master's idea. Now that the Star Master is dead and the person who brought you here has also been killed, please spare us." "Yes, none of this has anything to do with us. I didn't agree with the Star Master's idea from the beginning. Sir, it really has nothing to do with us. Senior, if you're willing, we'll all listen to your orders and do anything for you. The entire myriad poison planet will be yours." Immorse sneered. Now that they regretted it, what were they doing earlier? Some of the giant dragons saw from Immorse's expression that Immorse would never let them go. Thus, he directly crushed a skill stone that stored a spatial skill. He wanted to escape from this place. However, the skill stone was crushed, but he stayed where he was without moving. His eyes immediately widened as he looked at the fragments of the skill stone in his hand in disbelief. Could it be that this skill stone was fake? However, it wasn't just his skill stone that was useless. The other people's skill stones were also crushed, but they were all useless. Immorse smiled faintly. "Don't bother, it's useless." He had already used spatial skills to imprison the hall. It was impossible for anyone who entered the hall to use spatial skills to escape. Even a giant dragon with spatial attributes couldn't escape easily. This was because Immorse's spatial skills came from the Void Dragon's 9 transformations. The Void Dragon's 9 transformations was the culmination of all spatial skills. Even a giant dragon that was 1 grade higher than him would find it difficult to escape from his spatial skills. Unless a giant dragon that was 2 grades higher than him forcefully broke through his spatial skills with energy. However, he was already an 8th grade super-evolved giant dragon. There were no 10th grade super-evolved giant dragons on this planet. When these people realized that they couldn't escape, they were all scared out of their wits. They almost simultaneously knelt down before Immorse. Some of them even prostrated themselves on the ground and repeatedly shouted, "Instructor, please let us go. Senior Immo, Lord Immo, please let us go. We won't do it again, we won't do it again. Instructor Immo, Senior Immo, as long as you let us go, we're willing to do anything." However, Immorse couldn't be bothered with them. He waved his right hand lightly and a dark green energy flew out from between his fingers. This dark green energy turned into a 5-meter-long divine dragon. Not a Western dragon but an Eastern one. This divine dragon meandered in the air. These giant dragons had never seen such a creature. Humans were always filled with fear of the unknown. Their faces were all pale. They floated on the ground, not daring to move. Meanwhile, the dark green dragon continued to meander in the air. When it reached the center of the hall, boom! It suddenly exploded. In an instant, the entire hall was filled with dark green smoke. The bodies of the ministers and generals rapidly rotted in this dark green smoke. Their hair fell off and the skin on their faces rotted away. One could see the flesh and bones on their faces. Even their bones were rapidly corroding. "Ah! No. My Lord Senior, please let us go." These people screamed in agony as if they were pigs being slaughtered. However, there was no pity in Immorse's eyes. These people had killed countless people and harmed countless lives to reach their current positions. They deserved more than death. In the end, these 30-some ministers and generals all died from the poison they thought they were best at. Next, Immorse leaped and broke through the hall. A pair of dark green wings unfurled from his back. He quickly flew 500 meters into the air. Looking down at the golden city below, the 5 fingers of his right hand moved slightly, and another dark green dragon condensed between his fingers. This dragon was hundreds of times larger than the previous one. It was more than 3,000 meters long. The dragon meandered in the air. Although it was condensed from poison energy, its scales, claws, teeth and dragon whiskers all looked real. When the residents of the city below saw this, they were all aghast. Chapter 645. 1,000-meter-long dark green poison dragon coiled in the air. Its scales, claws, fangs and whiskers were all clearly visible. No one had ever condensed energy into something so lifelike. However, this was only the first transformation of the poison dragon. When the residents of the myriad poison city below saw this, their expressions changed drastically. They could feel the enormous energy contained in the poison dragon's body. They had never felt such tremendous energy from any creature before. When the soldiers below saw this, their expressions changed greatly. Although the entire upper echelon of the myriad poison star had been killed by Immerse, the warriors of the myriad poison star were well trained. They quickly gathered and activated the defensive array. Their defensive array was also of the poison attribute. This poison attribute could defend against both physical and energy attacks. Its principle was to cover the defensive barrier with extremely powerful corrosive toxins. This poison attribute could even corrode energy. That was why it would corrode any external physical or energy attack. This defensive array was built by the previous myriad poisons planet lord. It was said that it could defend against the attacks of super-evolved dragons of grade 8 and above. In truth, the poison dragon in the sky would not be able to break through this energy barrier in terms of sheer energy. However, it was important to remember that the 9 transformations of the poison dragon was a combination of all poison attribute techniques and techniques. It was a unique technique that took their strengths and made up for their weaknesses. It could counter all poison attribute techniques. That was why when the 1,000-meter-long dark green poison dragon came into contact with the colorful poison barrier, the barrier quickly melted away like blood coming into contact with fire. A short moment later, a 1,000-meter-wide hole was melted away. The poison dragon went straight in and bombarded the humans below. Roar. The poison dragon let out a long roar and charged toward the center of Myriad Poison's city. It did not attack any buildings or dragons. Instead, it blasted toward the ground. Immerse had never used the 9 transformations of the poison dragon in actual combat since he had mastered it. He had never even used the first transformation in actual combat. In the 10,000 poison city, every single one of them had their hands stained with blood. They had committed all sorts of evil deeds on other planets and were wanted by those planets. They had nowhere else to go, which was why they had come to Myriad Poison's planet. That was why Immerse wanted to use them to test the power of the first transformation of the poison dragon. However, at this moment, a black energy disk about 1,000 meters in diameter stopped the descending poison dragon. Bang! The poison dragon slammed into the black energy disk and exploded, forming a bloody mist with a diameter of tens of kilometers. It almost covered the entire sky of the City of Poisons. Looking up from the Myriad Poison City, the entire sky seemed to have turned dark green. One could imagine how serious the consequences would be if the poison dragon had exploded on the ground. At this moment, the black energy disk rose up and extended upwards, finally forming a huge black energy ball that enveloped the dark green smoke. Then it gradually shrank until it finally became a poison ball with a diameter of about 20 meters. This poison pill was so concentrated that it looked almost black. Even a level 10 super-evolved dragon would not be able to withstand the poison. At the same time, a voice suddenly rang out. Where it is possible to let people off, one should spare them. Kid, you've gone too far. The voice seemed to come from underground. Moreover, no matter which corner of the city you were in or outside of the city, you would hear the sound as if it was coming from under your feet. The people in the Myriad Poison City were all stunned. Then the fear on their faces turned into surprise. It's Poison King. That's right. It's the Poison King. Wasn't the Poison King already dead? What's going on? In the sky, after Immerse absorbed the memories of these people, he quickly understood what was going on with the Poison King. It turned out that thousands of years ago, before Du Qianhua arrived, the Myriad Poison planet did not have a Star Lord. At that time there was a Poison King. No one knew when the Poison King had appeared. It seemed that the Poison King had already existed when the first person arrived on the Myriad Poison planet. He seemed to be very strong. Legend had it that he was able to withstand all the poisonous creatures in the Myriad Poison Mountain alone and come out unscathed. There were also people who said that they had once seen the Poison King in his dragon form. It was a poisonous dragon that was close to 10,000 meters long. Moreover, he was not only poisonous but also earth-attributed. He was often able to merge with the earth. If he did not want to be discovered, even if you walked past him, it would be difficult to discover him. Under normal circumstances, the Poison King would not touch other people. He would only act when those people violated his interests. After Du Qianhua came to the myriad poison planet, the Poison King never appeared again. Some people said that he had already left the myriad poison planet, while others said that he was already dead. No one would have thought that the Poison King, who had not appeared for over 2,000 years, was still alive. When Immerse discovered this, he was slightly surprised. No wonder he did not use his demonic will to detect this guy. It turned out that he had merged with the earth. Based on how that guy was able to withstand the first transformation of his poison dragon, that guy should be at least rank 9. Otherwise, he would not be able to withstand the first transformation of the poison dragon. That guy might even be a rank 10 super evolved dragon. However, Immerse did not care at all. As long as he was not an ancient dragon, it would be easy to deal with him. This was only the first transformation of the poison dragon. If you have the ability, you can try to withstand the 3rd transformation, 5th transformation, or even the 9th transformation. Just as Immerse was pondering, a blue poisonous vine shot out from the ground towards Immerse, who was in the air. Before Immerse could react, it wrapped around Immerse's body. Immerse struggled a few times, but he was unable to break free. The poisonous vine had sharp thorns on it, and it looked like it would soon pierce through his body and inject some kind of poison into his body. When the residents below saw this, they were all overjoyed. Under the Poison King's attack, this guy could not even withstand a single attack. Even so, he still wanted to massacre the 1,000 Poison City. What a joke. Since Immerse could not break free, he simply used a spatial skill and teleported away. Dozens of poisonous vines stretched out from below. At first, Immerse was still dodging, constantly teleporting away from these poisonous vines. But soon more and more poisonous vines appeared below. With Immerse's speed, he was almost unable to dodge. Therefore, Immerse used a temporal skill, causing the poisonous vines to shoot at him to become very slow when they were within 100 meters of him. It was like slow motion in a movie. In this way, the poisonous vines could not hurt him at all. When the residents below saw this, they were all shocked once again. At the same time, a voice came from below. Poison attribute, spatial attribute, and temporal attribute. 3 attributes. This little guy is quite interesting. Chapter 646. Along with the sound coming from the ground, the entire ground began to shake. It was like the shaking of an earthquake. All the houses and buildings began to shake violently. Huge cracks began to appear on the ground. Hundreds and thousands of vines stretched out from the cracks. These vines were not formed by the vines of plants, but by the condensation of soil. Each of these vines was about 10 meters thick. They were like giant pythons crawling toward the ground. Then they slowly raised their heads and climbed toward the sky. When their heads reached the highest point, they intertwined with each other. Then a human figure condensed from the heads of those giant pythons. It looked like it was formed by the vines of soil. In fact, because it was of the earth attribute, its cells could integrate with the soil very well. On the surface, it looked like it was formed by the soil. In fact, it was only because the soil covered its tracks that it gave people a very shocking feeling. The people in the 10,000 Poison City were all dumbstruck when they saw this. It did not look like teleportation. It was transformation. A human could turn into soil, and then soil could turn into a giant dragon. This was a little 2F * King mysterious. However, Immerse, who had the demonic dragon's eye, could easily see this point. He did not show any surprise on his face. He carefully sized up the guy. He saw that the guy was dressed in yellow clothes and looked to be about 12 or 13 years old. His face still had a childish look. However, his eyes looked as if they had traveled through thousands of years. It was actually a child's face. This once again caused a burst of exclamations from the giant dragons present. They thought that such a powerful Poison King would be an adult or even an old man. They did not expect him to be a child who looked to be in his teens. In the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone, the human form was just another skin of the giant dragons. If they wanted to, they could use several methods to make their human appearance look very young. However, ordinary giant dragons would not do this, because it was purely unnecessary to take off one's pants and fart. If they fought, they would still transform into their dragon form. Now the Poison King was just a child who looked to be in his teens. This still surprised the giant dragons. Immorse looked at the Poison King from head to toe and then looked at the people in the city. He sneered and said, "Those who stand in my way will die." The Poison King laughed. "What arrogance! Today I will protect them." Since they didn't see eye to eye, he naturally didn't say anything more. Immorse didn't say anything else. He waved his right hand in the air. 2 balls of dark green energy condensed in his hands. The 2 balls of dark green energy quickly took shape. They formed 3 dark green dragons that were more than 20 meters long. The claws, fangs, tails, wings and eyes of the 3 dark green dragons were all very lifelike. Its eyeballs could even move around like a real dragon. At first, the 3 dark green dragons were only about 20 meters long, but as Immorse continued to pour energy into them, their bodies began to grow rapidly. With Immorse's current strength, he could only execute the 3rd transformation of the lone dragon. The 3 dragons quickly reached a length of 100 meters. Of course, the Poison King also sensed the enormous energy within the 3 dragons. He knew that Immorse was going to use a big move. He wouldn't let Immorse condense the 3 dragons. Thus he raised his right hand in the air. In an instant, more than 10 earth-type vines condensed on the ground and wrapped around Immorse. However, when the earth-type vines were about to reach Immorse, they suddenly slowed down. They were so slow that no one could see them moving forward. From the visual effect, it looked as if Immorse was doing nothing. When the earth-type vines reached Immorse, they suddenly stopped. Seeing this, the Poison King frowned. There was extreme disbelief in his voice. Time attribute? This guy actually had the time attribute. The Poison King had lived for so long, but he had never seen a guy with the time attribute. Now he actually encountered a guy with the time attribute. The most unbelievable thing was that this guy clearly had 3 attributes. How could he have the time attribute? One had to know that in the history of the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone, there had never been a dragon with 4 attributes. In other words, this guy had already broken through history. Even so, the Poison King couldn't let Immorse condense the 3 poison-type dragons like this. He waved his right hand again and hundreds of huge cone-shaped rocks on the ground flew toward Immorse in the sky. These cone-shaped rocks were like the tip of a spear, but each one was 100 meters long. However, these cone-shaped rocks stopped when they were 100 meters away from Immorse. Then they stopped moving. Because the space around these cone-shaped rocks was confined by Immorse. They couldn't move forward, they couldn't move backward, they couldn't go up, they couldn't go down. Seeing this, the Poison King couldn't help but be angry. A mere rank 8. What do you think I am? As he spoke, he waved his hand again and the huge cone-shaped rocks rose into the air again. It was as if someone was exerting a force on these cone-shaped rocks out of thin air. He wanted to use the fact that he was 2 ranks higher than Immorse to forcibly break through Immorse's spatial confinement. This was the natural suppression of ranks. Even if your attributes were strong, when the opponent was 2 ranks higher than you, many of your skills would be forcibly broken through by the opponent's brute force. At this moment, Immorse raised his head and looked at the 3 poison-type dragons. Chapter 647. It was the Poison King's Earth attribute giant. His purpose was to use brute force to break through Immorse's space-time black hole. He felt that as long as his level was higher than Immorse's, he would be able to crush Immorse with brute force. However, was that really the case? His Earth attribute giant ignored Immorse's space-time black hole and directly attacked Immorse's body. However, when the Earth attribute giant passed through the space-time black hole, a huge suction force attacked the Earth attribute giant. The Earth attribute giant's head was almost instantly sucked into the space-time black hole. However, another head quickly condensed on the Earth attribute giant's neck. At the same time, there was an endless stream of stones on the ground that replenished the giant's body. The giant's body became even bigger and was now close to 600 meters tall. Immorse was slightly surprised. In the past, as long as he used the space-time black hole, he was basically invincible. This time he had encountered a tough opponent. It seemed that the higher the level, the stronger the strength and the more powerful the energy. This was an unchanging truth. However, it was a pity that the guy was just a space-time super-evolved dragon. If he was an ancient dragon, he might really be able to break through his space-time black hole. It was not just possible but definitely possible. Of course, Immerse was only guessing. He had never seen an ancient dragon before, so he didn't know how powerful an ancient dragon was. At the same time, he felt that it was necessary to strengthen his training of the time attribute and space attribute as soon as possible. It was very difficult for his level to rise to that of an ancient dragon in a short period of time. Therefore, it was necessary to train these two attributes. If he understood these two attributes better, his spacetime black hole would be more powerful. Then, if he really encountered an ancient dragon, he would have a slight chance of winning. As Immerse continued to inject the time attribute and space attribute energy into the spacetime black hole, the diameter of the black hole became bigger and bigger, reaching twice its previous size. At the same time, the suction force from the spacetime black hole became stronger. The buildings, people, trees, and even the dragons on the ground were all sucked in. The huge suction force kept pulling at the giant. Although the Earth attribute giant was now 1,000 meters tall, he still seemed unable to resist the suction force of the spacetime black hole. He desperately tried to attack Immerse, but his upper body was constantly being pulled towards the black hole. Although there were still a large number of stones on the ground that were rapidly replenishing the giant's body, and the giant was still constantly growing in size, it was still unable to withstand the devouring power of the spacetime black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King teleported behind Immerse. He wanted to interrupt Immerse's replenishment of the spacetime black hole. However, Immerse had already expected this. The moment he appeared, Immerse teleported to the edge of the black hole. Then he looked at the Poison King provocatively. "Come over if you have the ability." Although the spacetime black hole could devour everything, it did not pose a threat to Immerse because it originated from Immerse. When the Poison King saw this, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get away with it. In a flash, he wanted to leave this place. However, his figure flashed twice, but he was unable to leave at all. Because he suddenly realized that the entire space seemed to have been locked. Damn it. He cursed in his heart and hurriedly fell towards the ground. He was a poison attribute giant dragon and an earth attribute giant dragon. As long as he was in contact with the ground, he could use earth escape and go wherever he wanted. No one could stop him. When he fell towards the ground, Immerse did not stop him. Instead, he looked at him with a mocking smile. The Poison King's head was down and his feet were up. Like a diver, he plunged towards the ground. However, when he was 50 meters away from the ground, a huge black hole with a diameter of 100 meters suddenly appeared on the ground. At this moment, the Poison King was sinking towards the center of the black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King's expression changed greatly. What was going on? The black hole was clearly about 5 kilometers away from him. Why did it suddenly appear on the ground in front of him? With how much effort it took for that guy to condense a black hole, it was impossible for him to condense a second one in such a short time. However, he had no time to think about this. He hurriedly transformed into a poison dragon that was nearly 10,000 meters long. This poison dragon looked as if he had traveled through time and space. His old skin and his weathered eyes looked as if he had already existed since the beginning of the world. However, at this moment, his weathered eyes revealed a look of extreme fear. He flapped his giant wings that were nearly 10,000 meters wide and wanted to escape into the distance. However, a huge suction force came from behind him. His tail was already sucked into the black hole. He did not feel anything, but this made him extremely terrified. After all, no one knew what was inside the black hole. Would it be death or another world inside the black hole? People were always full of fear towards things that they were unfamiliar with. At this moment, the guy was extremely terrified. He flapped his wings with all his might, but it seemed to be useless. The huge suction force of the black hole had already swallowed his entire tail, followed by his butt and then his pair of hind legs. No, the guy's throat erupted with a horrified roar that sounded like the beginning of the universe. This roar seemed to be able to penetrate the entire planet. However, his body was still being swallowed by the black hole. In fear, he stretched out his wings as if he wanted to use his wide wings to block the black hole's entrance. However, he was still too naive. His wings were quickly swallowed as soon as they touched the edge of the black hole. The black hole did not care about your size. Of course, the black hole also had a capacity, but this capacity was so large that it was unimaginable. If Immerse did not care and allowed this black hole to develop, it would slowly swallow the entire planet and even the entire galaxy. At this moment, Immerse just smiled faintly. Therefore it was ridiculous to want to use his wings to block the black hole's entrance. Seeing that he could not escape, the Poison King hurriedly begged Immorse, "Little guy, let me go. I have lived for more than 50,000 years and know many secrets of the planet. If you let me go, you will benefit for the rest of your life." Immorse did not pay attention to him at all. The Poison King's front claws kept flapping around, but it was useless. Finally, after a minute, the Poison King's figure disappeared into the black hole. At this moment, the Poison King that once terrified the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone was finally gone. When the people in the 10,000 Poison City saw that the Poison King was dead, they were all terrified and hurriedly fled in all directions. Chapter 648. 648. With a single move, countless lives were lost. Immorse's black hole swallowed the Poison King. When the residents of Myriad Poison City saw this, their expressions changed drastically as they fled in all directions. In the past, the city of Myriad Poisons had been a paradise for these desperados. It was their shelter, their harbor from the storm. However, the current Myriad Poison City was hell for them. Immorse watched as the residents of Myriad Poison City fled in all directions. He wasn't worried at all. He waved his hands lightly and the black hole on the ground disappeared. If this black hole was allowed to continue swallowing, forget about Myriad Poison City. The entire Myriad Poison planet and the entire galaxy would probably be swallowed up. At the same time, the 3 giant poison dragons in the sky had already reached 10,000 meters long. In the next moment, the 3 giant poison dragons flew toward the ground at the same time. At almost the same time, the giant poison dragons fiercely stabbed into the ground. In the next moment, it was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. The entire Myriad Poison City, which was hundreds of kilometers in radius, was instantly swallowed up by the dark green shockwave. The shockwave quickly spread in all directions. All the buildings, animals, plants, and giant poison dragons were sucked into it. The creatures, buildings, stones, and wood that were sucked into the shockwave were all corroded into nothingness in a short period of time. Even the ground was corroded to a thickness of 5 meters. At the same time, a dark green mushroom cloud soared into the sky. If you had seen an atomic bomb before, you would be able to imagine the current situation. However, the smoke and shockwave formed by the atomic bomb here were all dark green in color. The shockwave continued to spread in all directions. None of the residents of Myriad Poison City were able to escape. The moment they were swallowed by the shockwave, they were corroded. Their flesh was corroded until only their bones were left. In the end, even their bones were corroded into nothingness. Immorse, who was in the sky, could only hear a series of miserable screams. However, his face was expressionless. For the residents of Myriad Poison City, Immorse's arrival was the end of the world. Moreover, the Poison Dragon's third transformation was far more powerful than this. The shock wave of the explosion destroyed the entire Myriad Poison City. However, the Poison Dragon's third transformation's greatest power lay in the mushroom cloud formed by the explosion. The mushroom cloud quickly spread in the sky, forming dark green smoke that enveloped an area of 10,000 kilometers. Within half an hour, everything within tens of thousands of kilometers was shrouded in thick fog. Under the cover of the thick fog, the leaves began to rot rapidly, the trees quickly decayed, and the mountain rocks quickly turned into gravel. The mountains that were tens of thousands of meters tall began to collapse like sand sculptures that had lost their moisture. The rivers and lakes within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers also quickly turned dark green. The fishes and prawns in the sea and lakes all turned over and floated to the surface. The bodies of all the creatures in the forest began to rot rapidly. One had to know that these creatures were highly toxic to begin with. Many of them even had 7 or 8 types of toxins. However, under the Poison Dragon's third transformation, no creature could last more than a minute. From this, it could be seen how powerful the Poison Dragon transformation was. At the same time, Immorse's mind was flooded with messages. 3 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +3. 5 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +5. 9 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +9. 5 minutes later, the spam in his mind finally stopped. At this time, his dragon slaying points had reached more than 30,000. Dragon slaying points, 3011311000. You can be promoted. Do you want to promote now? Immerse's eyes lit up as he looked at it. His face and ears were red. With more than 30,000 dragon slaying points, he could definitely promote himself to a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon. This promotion will take 5 minutes. During the promotion, the host cannot use energy to fight. Please find a safe place as soon as possible. Before the system's voice died away, Immerse had already entered Earth's space. In Earth's space, he accelerated time again. In almost an instant, 5 minutes had passed. Promotion successful. Promotion requires 5,000 dragon slaying points. The host's current dragon slaying points are 29113. You can be promoted. Do you want to promote now? Immerse rubbed his hands excitedly. Of course, I want to promote. The next moment, the system's voice sounded in his mind again. This promotion will take 5 minutes. Immerse sped up the time again, and within a short 2 seconds, the 5 minutes had already passed. At the same time, the system's voice sounded in his mind again. Promotion successful. Immerse checked his level in his mind. Name, Immerse. Level, rank 10 super evolved giant dragon, rank 1 mystic. Ability. Click to expand. Goal, evolve into an ancient giant dragon. Phew, Immerse let out a long breath. He had finally become a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon. As a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon, he could almost do whatever he wanted in the 10,000 dragon star zone. After all, in the past 100,000 years, there had never been an ancient giant dragon in the 10,000 dragon star zone. Therefore, a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon was the combat power ceiling of the 10,000 dragon star zone. Immerse had only been in the become dragon star zone for less than 2 years, and he had already reached the peak. If it were other protagonists in novels, they would have gone out to show off and embarrass themselves. However, Immerse had always been a cautious person. Although no ancient giant dragons had appeared, who knew if there would be any hidden ancient giant dragons? Therefore, even if he had reached the combat power ceiling, he would not go out to show off and embarrass himself. Of course, he would not always be a yes man and hide in a corner. If someone dared to ride on his head, he would make that person regret it for the rest of his life. At this moment, he looked at the dragon slaying points required to evolve into an ancient giant dragon. Dragon slaying points, 241131000000. Ancient dragon crystal, 0 to 1, damn. Immerse could not help but exclaim. Just looking at the string of zeros behind the dragon slaying points made Immerse feel dizzy. The system explained very considerately, frowny face. There are 2 ways to evolve into an ancient giant dragon. The first way is to obtain 1 million dragon slaying points. The second way is to kill an ancient giant dragon and obtain 1 ancient dragon crystal. Immerse scratched his head. System, you directly changed the dragon slaying points from 5,000 to 1 million. Doesn't your conscience hurt? The system was silent and did not respond. Immerse shook his head helplessly and said again, for the second way, you want me to kill an ancient giant dragon. Does this mean that there are ancient giant dragons in the 10,000 dragon star zone? The system still ignored him. What AF * King Cold system? Immerse looked at the 2 methods carefully again. If he wanted to obtain 1 million dragon slaying points, there would have to be a war. Moreover, the death toll of a war within a planet would not exceed 1 million. Only in an interstellar war would the death toll exceed 1 million. However, if there was no special reason, would 2 planets have so much free time to start a war? Therefore, the first method would not work. Chapter 649. The first option, which was to kill millions of dragons, would not work for now. Therefore, Immerse set his sights on the second ancient dragon. However, as far as he knew, not a single ancient dragon had appeared in this world in the past 100,000 years. All the memories he had absorbed proved that there were no ancient dragons in this world. Therefore, the second option seemed even more unreliable than the first one. After thinking about it carefully, he still felt that the first option was slightly easier to achieve. Although this world did not have frequent wars, there would always be one every 1,000 years or so. With his current lifespan, he could live for tens of thousands of years. He could definitely wait. Moreover, even if Immerse could not wait for 1,000 years, he could still use other methods to kill these dragons. For example, right now he could use his powerful strength to head to a certain planet and start a massacre. Of course, if he did that, he would quickly become the public enemy of the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. By then he would probably be killed by the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone before he could evolve into an ancient dragon. He already had a preliminary plan in his mind at this moment. That was to establish an assassination organization. It was not as if there were no assassination organizations in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. These assassination organizations were paid to kill for others. Moreover, they appeared and disappeared mysteriously. It was very difficult to catch them. However, these assassination organizations adhered to one creed, and that was to never assassinate anyone from the government. Therefore, the government did not spend much effort to eliminate these assassination organizations. Some people even said that the government was behind these assassination organizations. However, this had never been proven. Of course, the government would never admit this. Immorse had already thought of a name for this assassination organization. It would be called the Lanling Association. And he would be the leader of the Lanling Association, the Lanling King. Moreover, he had already planned out how to operate it. With his current strength, he could create at most 500 clones. The power of each clone would be at the level of an 8th grade super-evolved dragon. Moreover, as long as they did not die, each clone could exist for at least 24 hours. When that time came, he would not need to find other members. He could do all the work himself. This way, even if the government investigated, there would not be too many clues. After confirming this point, Immorse's heart finally calmed down. He boarded the spaceship and left 10,000 Poison Planet. When the spaceship flew out of 10,000 Poison Planet's atmosphere, he saw the location of 10,000 Poison City. With the myriad Poison City as the center, everything within a radius of 10,000 kilometers had turned dark green. From space it looked like a dark green spot. The next time a spaceship passed by, it would discover the abnormality of the myriad Poison Planet. However, this was not something Immorse needed to care about. After all, very few people came to myriad Poison Planet. Even if they did, so what if they were discovered? Even the government probably couldn't wait for the myriad Poison City on the myriad Poison Planet to be destroyed as soon as possible. Now that someone had done it for them, they couldn't be happier. Immorse used the Big Bug Bridge to return to the vicinity of planet Cloud Sea. After another 2 hours of flying, he was finally back. When the Dean heard that Immorse had returned, he was extremely excited. Ever since Immorse left, he had been worried about Immorse. Immorse was finally back. At the same time, he was also amazed. How did Instructor Immo come back from the Myriad Poison Star? One had to know that ever since the Myriad Poison City on the Myriad Poison Planet was built, none of the giant dragons that went to the Myriad Poison Planet had ever returned alive. If the Master of the Stars knew that Immorse had not only returned, but also destroyed all the giant dragons in the Myriad Poison City, he would not know what to think. When the Master of the Stars, Kong Hai, heard that Immorse had returned, he immediately rushed to the Cloud Sea Academy. Seeing that Immorse was unharmed, Kong Hai was relieved. At the same time, he said to Immorse, "Instructor Immo, you didn't suffer any grievances over there, right? Don't worry. When the Cloud Sea planet develops, I will definitely lead troops to destroy the Myriad Poison Planet." Immorse didn't say anything when he heard this. He just shook his head with a faint smile. Kong Hai knew that Immorse must have thought that he was joking. He quickly extended his right hand and promised Immorse, "Instructor Immo, I am telling the truth. When the Cloud Sea planet's star power reaches that level one day, I will destroy the Myriad Poison Planet first. I will avenge you, Instructor Immo." Immorse did not explain. He just nodded and said, "Okay, it's good that you have such intentions." The following days began to be peaceful again. Immorse continued to teach students and run cram classes at the same time. When he had free time, he had been secretly planning for the Lanling Association. Now the plan was almost complete. Actually, he could already release the news and start accepting jobs. However, Immorse was in a bit of a dilemma about how to release the news. If you released the news that you were accepting jobs, people with ulterior motives might be able to track you down through the news. According to Immorse's understanding, many assassin organizations in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone had been destroyed because of this reason. Therefore, assassin organizations now usually had their own special contacts and secret codes. There was also a very strict vetting process and so on. Immorse definitely could not do it alone. After thinking about it, he felt that the Lanling Association needed an opportunity to make a name for itself. After that, he would think of a way to find a contact. However, Immorse was racking his brains on how to get this opportunity. Immorse did not want to do it anymore. He had always been afraid of trouble. In the end, he decided to leave this matter to Emma. In fact, Emma was quite good at organizing. Moreover, after Immorse kept throwing those dragon corpses into Earth's space and Emma drank their blood, Emma was now a super-evolved giant dragon. Moreover, she had evolved into a blood-type giant dragon that had never appeared in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. Her self-healing ability was extremely abnormal. Not to mention chopping off her head, even if only a piece of flesh was left, she could quickly recover. After she heard about Immorse's plan, she had been thinking about it in her heart. In the end, she had a joint plan in mind. However, this joint plan still needed Immorse to make a name for himself first. Of course, they needed an opportunity to make a name for themselves. They had to wait for such an opportunity now. Sometimes when one was lucky, someone would give them a pillow. Half a month later, such an opportunity came. On this day there was news. It was said that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea had been discovered in a certain star zone. As soon as this news spread, hundreds of nearby planets were instantly in an uproar. It was said that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea were places where ancient giant dragons used to cultivate. These places contained a large number of treasures, cultivation techniques, and secret manuals. If one could get one or two of them in the Starry Sky Deep Sea, it was very likely that they would soar. If they could get their hands on a cultivation technique or secret manual, they might become the top combat power of the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone in a short time. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.